Okay.
Who's winning?
Hey there.
Hi.
Hi, Wes.
Hi, Tracy.
How are you?
Just fine. It's been a long day, but everything's okay.
Good. It has been a long day. I agree with you there.
Tracy, I had hoped to be able to run across you this weekend and wasn't able to. I just wanted to advise, and other people on the planning board can kick in here if they want to, but we've always felt that if someone didn't make the majority of meetings about a particular application, they should recuse themselves from voting.
Okay, fair enough. I agree.
Yep, I thought you would. I knew you.
Yes.
I just thought I'd mention it. That's all.
Yes, I did a lot of reading and plan to do a lot of listening tonight, but I agree that I haven't been involved until this point. So I'm happy to do that.
You still have good thoughts and ideas
Sure,
to contribute. So,
sure.
you know, that's going to be important
Okay.
for us. Okay. It is 7 o'clock, and we have myself. Let's see. I'm going to admit Eric Barron. And we have David Strock, Don Sharp, Joe Pierce, Tracy Grisey, Bob Flint, Dwight Warren, Rick Lundborn, Wes Sunderland, Aidan Foley, Brooke Barnes, Matt Sanborn, and I hope I got everybody. Let me see. Dick Jarrett and Eric Barron and Bill O'Connor. So quite a cast of Baldwin folks, as well as teams from the Long Road and the new West Baldwin solar application. And on the agenda tonight, the first order of business is the public hearing. So before we actually start the regularly scheduled planning board, we need to do the public hearing for the Glenvale or West Baldwin solar application. And I will let them present. Normally in these things, I don't know if any of the folks on the phone are abutters or public members of Baldwin that are interested in the public hearing and want to make comments and ask questions about the solar farm, but please let us know if you are. And then I'll turn it over to the folks from Glenvale to, you know, just kind of take us through give us an overview. One thing I want to ask that I know that David Strock did before is that if we can make note of our comments and then hold them in abeyance until Rick Lundborn and his team from Glenvale get through their overview of the presentation. And then we can start talking about issues and concerns and trying to get answers and things like that.
All right.
Okay, looks like I need to admit Stephen Bird and Taffy. So I just admitted them. Hi, Stephen. Hi, Taffy.
Hey,
We're
how's it
about
going?
to, good. We're about to get started with the public hearing. And Rick, are you going to present?
Yes. Yes, I am.
Okay. Let me see if I click on these dots, I should be able to make you the host. I'll click on that.
Thank
Yes.
Make me the presenter, yep.
And then you should be able to show us your screen.
All righty. Weird. All right, let me move this out of the way. And I will actually expand the screen so that we can click through these in full screen mode. This is essentially, the only thing I've updated on this presentation is today's date. This is the same overview from the meeting that we held with you folks. And in the interim, we've had the site walk and I've been awaiting this scheduled meeting here. So again, as Matt said, we're here tonight to discuss the West Baldwin Solar Station in the town of Baldwin and partially in the town of Hiram for the conditional use permit application in Baldwin. So I'm gonna go over pretty much the slides as an overview, just for those who've seen this before, so I'll apologize if it seems redundant. So Glendale and West Baldwin Solar Station LLC have leased land from some local landowners, PY Estes and Son and Ricky and Sarah Day. The proposed project will use approximately 120 acres of land on the Baldwin Tax Map 12 Lot 13B. That's owned by the Estes Group. Tax Map 12 Lot 14A, that's owned by Ricky and Sarah Day. And the Hiram Tax Map R10 Lot 23, which is also owned by the Estes family. So that's this piece here in Hiram. This is the other parcel owned by the Estes, and this is the parcel owned by the Days. I also have access to look at these in a little bit bigger scale as we get through the presentation. These properties are used for forest management currently, and every once in a while they'll be harvested. I think when we went out there on the site walk, they had cleared some of the trees that had fallen in one of the last storms over the winter. That's, typically, they're doing some selective cuts throughout the year on all those parcels. The current CMP access transmission line that has made these set of parcels attractive runs kind of a north-south, right off the edge of the smaller eastern bay of Ingalls Pond. So right there, and crosses onto the Estes lot and then continues on into Hiram. Ooh, sorry. So as far as project size, the array will generate 21.5 megawatts direct current. That translates to about 16.2 megawatts of alternating current, the same that you would use in your power outlets at home. 50,000 solar modules that will be employed to generate that electricity. And this is what they refer to as a fixed tilt array. So the panels run from east to west and they are static, they don't move. And that tilt that will be applied to those panels will be 30 degrees. The rows will be spaced at about 16 feet apart, and they'll be for SNA branded 4,600 megawatt inverters, or actually 4.6 megawatt inverters, 4,600 kilowatt inverters on site. At each inverter location, which we'll see in a minute, there's a storage ready capacity that can have battery backup or battery storage of power located at those spots. As far as generation, there'll be about just under 30,000 megawatt hours generated in the first year, and that's equivalent to about 4,611 homes. So over a 30-year design life for the panels themselves, that's about 820,472 megawatt hours. And that is equivalent to 580,074 tons of carbon that will be eliminated by not burning fossil fuels to generate electricity. So as far as interconnection goes, we're looking at a layout of a substation that looks like this. The proposed interconnection is on Central Maine Power's section 91. That's that north-south line that we saw. And right now, Glenvale and West Baldwin Solar Station have been working with Solar Design Associates and SGC Engineering for the electrical design and the optimization of solar arrays. They've had their queue position and application in with ISO New England, and their system impact study is currently scheduled and in process. So again, I'll blow this up in a minute after we get through the presentation breakdown of things so we can look at this in detail. But the array, the site design considerations that helped us site the array were, the transmission corridor from CMP being right across the site. You'll see these orange locations here. This larger orange box is the substation location, and we're going to locate that directly adjacent to those power lines. Other considerations throughout the process were to minimize direct wetland impacts where we would be filling a wetland. There is clearing of trees in wetlands as part of this project, but direct impacts where we're either impounding a wetland or water body or impacting it and putting fill into it, those have been minimized quite substantially. Actually, the impact directly is limited to 2 stream crossings, one here on the southern end of the road network and one here on the more northerly approach of the road network as you go out and around the back loop. The project has been designed with topography in mind, and in so much as the road is trying to make the grade getting into the site easier on vehicles for construction, but also later in the future for folks that come out to do inspections and maintenance. So currently the access road, which you can kind of see here, and again, I'll blow this up in a minute, actually comes in from just over the town line in Hiram and kind of hugs Ingalls Pond, unfortunately, which we all saw when we were on the sidewalk, and kind of comes to a big clearing right after the power lines. So the proposed alignment is to move it closer to the property line and slowly climb the grade to get up here. Right now, from this location, you'd have quite a vertical climb to get up into the area over here, whereas we're going to come in and kind of slowly loop around and stick to the road network, following the contours as best we can. Overall, the site will be secure. There will be a perimeter fence, but the perimeter fence will be held up 6 inches from the ground to allow for smaller animals to go back and forth. And actually, one of the exhibits that I've got tonight to share with everybody is actually breaking the fence into 2 compartments, one in this area and then another that kind of circumscribes the larger part of the array. And that breaking that fence up allows for larger mammals to continue to follow that stream and head back and forth from Ingalls Pond and out into the woods to the north, and doesn't create a huge impediment for them on that corridor. So we also have provided wooded buffers to the streams on property. Here and here, that buffer is 100 foot from either side of the streams, and we're set back far from the resource of Ingalls Pond, well outside the 250 foot buffer down there for the resource protection zone. As far as impacts to cultural resources, there aren't going to be any on this site. We did consult with Maine Historic Preservation Commission and did send requests out to the tribes, and they've all come back with no report of any cultural resources. And rare and threatened and endangered species has come back with a negative result as well. The caveat being that the northern long-eared bats, which are endangered throughout the northeast of the United States, are going to show up anywhere where there's an expanse of trees. And what that really means is it limits the time that we're allowed to do timber harvest and cutting. So this project will adhere to those guidelines set forth by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. Otherwise, we also chose. The site was also chosen because we're trying to. It's attractive because it's kind of secluded. So from a noise perspective, both during construction and then later during operation, there won't really be any noise that is going to be overly noticeable to the community. And visually, being set back so far behind a fairly substantial tree buffer from the road and the surrounding properties.
Here is they were supposed to have a tree buffer and they don't.
Yeah.
Lost in the shuffle.
Yeah.
So,
Folks, yeah, this is Matt Fricker. Could everybody mute their microphones so we don't hear background noise and chatter?
so as far as the regulatory process goes,
Thank you.
in conjunction with the process both here in Baldwin and in Hiram, we're for conditional use permits / site plan review and ultimately a building permit when the project gets through this process. We have 2 state of Maine permits that we're in the process of receiving. One being the Site Location and Development Act, known as Site Law or SLOTA, and also the Natural Resources Protection Act, known as NERPA. So if you hear me say those 2 acronyms, that's what I'm referring to. Part of that, we've noticed the abutters, both through a public information hearing ahead of coming into the town, and then also, frankly, as part of the town process. So site location and development applications generally are for projects that are over 20 acres in size. This one obviously is. Large subdivisions, or in the case of the oil terminal facility along the coast. So the permit is generally concerned with stormwater management, erosion control, protection of groundwater, protecting existing infrastructure, wildlife and fisheries, and mitigating any noise. Again, this is a pretty innocuous use. It doesn't generate a ton of noise. So that is an issue. And we've done erosion control design and stormwater management design for this project. So those items are taken care of and controlled, and there really is not a groundwater impact. There's not really going to be any paved surfaces of any real import. The road itself will be gravel. So, and again, down here, it just talks about the public hearings that have been held and things of that nature. So this is kind of a rehash of that portion that I just talked about with SLOTA. But as far as the NERPA permit goes, that's concerned with habitat protection, particularly of Ingalls Pond, and improving the buffer. In our case, we're moving the access road to this property much further away from Ingalls Pond than it is today. And that will overall improve the buffer to that habitat and natural resource. And then again, like I mentioned earlier, limiting the direct impacts, which would have water quality impacts to the streams and to Ingalls Pond. And as I had mentioned, we're only really impacting the site in those resources at the road crossings and then posts throughout areas where we do build out over a wetland that we're converting to a meadow wetland. So we did have, or I should say that the Glendale folks, West Baldwin Solar Station folks had some site renderings, perspectives done. This rendering is kind of an aerial view off to the southwest, looking over Ingalls Pond towards the site. This section 91 refers to the CMP transmission corridor, and this area here, which looks like it's a water body, is actually the PYSD's gravel pit. This is the water body of Ingalls Pond, and you can see down here another little chunk of it. So perspective one, from this location, looking out over the site, what you will notice is there's a fairly substantial area of trees that's going to remain between the road, the lake, and the array. And those trees do climb a fair amount up the hill. Most of those trees are fairly mature and, between 60 and 70 feet tall, as we saw when we were on the sidewalk. So of the renderings, we have rendering 1, 2, 3, and 4, all looking out towards the array over Ingalls Pond. And as you can see, due to the trees that are going to remain and some of the climb ahead of the array, the array won't be visible. You can kind of see here in this portion of the rendering, the clearing for some of that CMP easement as it runs out over the back of Ingalls Pond. But all in all, the expectation is that you're not really going to visually see it from the road. Mr. Strzok did email me a Google Drive or Street View this morning or this afternoon of a location back here looking this way, wondering if the hill that he saw over here was over here, and we'll talk about that exhibit in a moment and go from there. So other than that, I will actually change documents if you want to get a better look at the layout and everything. But first, I think what I'd like to do is discuss the Google Street View image and that perspective vantage point, and then go through the rest and maybe take some questions. So this is the image that Mr. Strzok had some questions about. This guardrail is at the end on the almost Hiram border of the property. And as you can see, this vantage is actually looking back almost east, southeast along Route 113. And what Mr. Strzok had asked is if this hill was on the property and potentially one of the ones that we were saying that the array was climbing up. And if so, how can we be assured that, as you can see, there's kind of a lighter run of trees in front of the darker hill in the background. If the array was on that darker section, how do these trees down here block it? Well, that's not the hill, because again, looking at the guardrail, which is along the road, and the power lines, you can look at this map here, give it a second. And what you can see is that, I'm gonna put this in full screen view so it's a little easier to see the whole thing. What you can see is the guardrail is right here that we were talking about, the end of it. And this would be the new entry into the site. If you look back along the road, and actually I have a sneaking suspicion that that street view angle is more this way. But just saying, if you go due east looking towards that hilled area, you're not even looking at the site. To really get a good view of the site, you'd have to be over here near one of the utility poles on Route 113 and look this way. And at that point, you know, even a tall person with an eye level of about 5'6" would have to be looking over the tops of 60, 70-foot trees that are climbing up the hill here. And you're gonna be forced to look over the array, which is behind those trees, and you're not gonna see it from the street. So I'm pretty confident that the renderings are accurate. And I am, you know, happy that Mr. Strzok asked the question because, you know, again, that street view is kind of indicating that there's a hill over there, but, you know, that's not on property. You kind of tell that it's on the other end of the pond and actually on another property. So with that, I think what I'll do is I'll stop talking and I'll take questions. I do have the full plan set available, as well as some other maps and things, but I think it's probably best that I just take questions and get this started. I'll release the share right now, Matt, so you can have back a better screen of everybody.
Okay. All right. Thank you, Rick. Very informative. And let's open it up to first questions or concerns from any members of the public. Anybody from Baldwin that has any questions about the project, things they'd like to ask the Glenvale team? And if you want to talk, you have to take yourself off mute.
Hi, okay, am I recognized here? My name is Dick Jarrett. I am the treasurer of the Francis Small Heritage Trust, and I'm speaking on behalf of the trust tonight. Francis Small owns a public preserve on Ingalls Pond right below this project, and it also borders the Saco River there in Baldwin. And I must say, Rick was very nice to meet with us on Zoom and answered a lot of our questions. Our biggest concern, and I think I couldn't understand if Rick said they had addressed this or that was just proposed, but this is a large project spanning 2 towns, and it has a large riparian area that bisects 2 sections of the plan. And the original plan called for a perimeter fence around the entire project, including the riparian area. And we proposed, and they agreed to consider dividing the project into 2 blobs. Is it possible for me to share my screen?
I can actually share my map if you'd like, Dick.
Okay, wait, share screen. Oh, no, disabled, sorry.
No, that's fine. I'll share it and I'll show you the map that I intended to do at the tail end of my presentation. Sorry about that. So this is a little bit harder to read, folks, and I apologize. It's black and white topographic map, but what you'll see on here in color is in these reddish magenta lines is the fence perimeters. So coming in again from Route 113, there won't be a road until you get to the east side of the power transmission corridor. Then there'll be a perimeter fence that goes around that has a gate first to let you in. And actually the substation will be gated as well. And then it'll circumscribe the infrastructure that will be constructed here in this smaller area. We'll have a gate here to continue on the access road and a gate here to continue on the access road. but that'll be a self-contained little area there. And then the larger portion of the array will have a fence around it as well, but with a gate and yet another gate on either end of the road. There'll be some gates scattered along the back edge too for egress if someone's out there and needs help, like a workman or something. So what you will see is that what we did do in response to Mr. Jarrett and Francis Small Heritage Trust's concerns was leave basically the entire stream buffer and then some when you get beyond the infrastructure of this inverter setup and this turnaround and stream crossing. We've widened out and eliminated the fence and added a piece of fence here and here instead of going all the way around and making a giant blocked area. So now any larger woodland animals, deer, moose, and what have you can travel back and forth along that stream corridor like they would today and do so relatively unimpeded. Another point of interest is this stream crossing here will be at a minimum an 8-foot culvert with an open bottom. So it'll continue to have a natural bottom stream through there. So any fish passage that could occur will continue, as will this one. This one will also be a 3-sided structure with an open bottom. It looks like Aiden's raising his hand. So I'll let Aiden talk.
Well,
Thanks, Rick. You have addressed our concerns. I really appreciate you considering the suggestion and actually adopting it. I think it's, I'm very much happy with the proposal. Thank you.
All right. You still want to talk, Aiden?
yeah, I just want to make sure the chair is happy with that. So
Did you address that to the planning board, Aiden?
yeah, that was to you, Mr. Chair. I just would like to comment on the same question briefly, if that's okay.
I mean, it seems like a common sense idea, and we'll have to see what any of the other planning board members think. The only thing that came into my mind was, does this allow easier human access by teenagers or kids or anything like that, where they could get into the panels and the inverters and the batteries and all those kinds of things? And is that any kind of an issue? I'm just thinking about access and safety. It may be a moot point if the fence that's up there is easily climbable by them, but you know, that was the only thing that occurred to me. Other than that, I think it's you know, very thoughtful. Any other planning board members have thoughts on the revised fencing plan?
I'll comment. I like the revised fencing plan so the animals have access to the stream. That was well thought out.
Good. Good. Okay, we're gonna follow the rule here, like I used to do in strategic planning during my career. We always said silence is concurrence. So if nobody's speaking up, then you know we'll move on, and we'll certainly at the end of the process have the opportunity to address any other thoughts and questions when we work on the conditions for the CUP.
Good.
Okay. Are there any other comments or questions or concerns from the public as part of the public hearing? Okay. So hearing none, I want to ask my mentors here, David and Joe, is it appropriate now to close the public hearing and open up the normally scheduled session of the planning board?
There you go.
Okay, we're getting a thumbs up. So at this point at 7:33, we will close the public hearing with our thanks to Rick and Aidan and the Glenvale team for the presentation and the thoughtfulness that went into it. And we will now open up the April 22nd meeting of the Baldwin Planning Board. And before we go to our first agenda item, I was remiss in not doing this in the first place. And it's the Planning Board's pleasure to introduce Don Sharp, who just moved to Baldwin and was appointed to the Planning Board on Tuesday night. So everybody welcome Don. Don, take the floor and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, thank you. It's really a real honor to be find a place on the planning board. And from myself is I'm retired about a year ago. I was a civil engineer and an architect for 50 years, and I had served on other planning boards, and I just felt like it was a thing that I could help Baldwin with and be a part of any planning process that's going on. We live on 113 down by Steep Falls, and my wife and I, and we're just really enjoying being here. We had moved up from New Jersey to be with family. We have family in Hollis, and so we had vacationed up in Sebago for many years, and it's just something nice for us to do is just to come up and be in this environment. And now I just look forward to working with the town and with the planning board and add whatever I can here.
Thank you.
Welcome aboard.
Well, that's great, Don.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Right.
You know, we were sorry to lose Nickel Ernst, who had been our secretary, to his business needs, and also Bob to the select board. But what great fortune to have Tracy Grisey join us at the last meeting. And for those of you that didn't meet Tracy, she is a lawyer and we're probably one of the only planning boards in our area that have two lawyers and a professional engineer on staff. So we are feeling very high-powered and welcome you both to the planning board.
Thank you.
Thank you.
The next thing on the agenda is the consideration and approval of the minutes from April 8th. Does anybody have any comments or changes? Is there a motion to approve those?
I move we approve the minutes as distributed.
Is there a second?
Second. I'll second.
All in favor, raise your hands. Okay, unanimous. Thank you very much. I think we've gotten, we've covered the second agenda item, which is the update on new planning board members. So, Bob and Dwight, thank you very much for finding us two new great planning board members. And I guess, are we still looking for another alternate? Is the ad still running?
No, we haven't had any more applications.
Okay. All right. Well, okay. Now, the next order of business on the agenda is really to go into the Glenvale Solar CUP discussion, but I'm going to suggest we switch things up just a little bit and ask our CEO, Wes Sunderland, to give us an update on the shoreland zoning amendment and our approval process for getting the DEP to look at and approve changes, and how that may impact both the Long Road and the Glenvale CUPs and building permits and things. So seems relevant. And Wes, why don't you give us an update there on that issue?
Okay, thank you. We all know that Long Roads had presented an amendment for the shoreland zone to be able to examine and move delineation lines to be more accurate than the shoreland zone map reflects. And that went through the planning board and got approved, and went through a special town meeting and got voted and approved, but it was never turned in to DEP. And according to Section 8 of the shoreline zone, it says that amendments must be turned into DEP to be approved, and they have a 45-day period to allow examination of it and approve it. And if they just hold it on the desk and nobody approves it, it automatically gets approved after 45 days. So as a result, it hasn't been turned in, but the CUP was voted and approved and signed and dated in February, which obviously now is before any amendment has been allowed to be approved by DEP. Therefore, the amendment, when it does reach DEP and gets approved, it's not retroactive back to February, so it will not affect Long Road's project. So that's the dilemma we have right now. Matt and I talked this morning, and I think there's a way to make it work, and that is basically to I don't know if I should say nullify the CUP for Long Roads, then have the amendment go to DEP, get approved, and then revote and reapprove the CUP for Long Roads so that its dating of approval is within or after the amendment gets approved by DEP, and then it would be effective. That's the view I have on that. Okay, Matt.
Okay, thank you, Wes. Any members of the planning board have any thoughts or comments or ideas on that?
Sure, I'll talk. if I can. Do you want to go first, Joe?
No, no.
Yeah, I mean, I guess I'm just flabbergasted at this interpretation. You know, the town passed the shoreline zoning change. We effectuated that with a vote, and then we approved the CUP. Wes's jurisdiction is the town ordinance, and whether or not it's submitted to the DEP, as far as Wes is concerned, doesn't have anything to do with the enforceability of it. I guess I'm just, that, you know, the persnicketyness of this issue is just confounds me when we have other situations where, you know, Wes has basically let businesses go knowing they're in direct violation of state law. With it, just like, this seems to me, and I'll just say it, this seems retaliatory to me, that this type of enforcement judgment in this situation, it confounds me. And I think there's no question that the CUP is legitimate. And I don't think there's any basis to nullify, revisit, or reassess the CUP. What needs to happen is the shoreline zoning ordinance needs to be submitted to DEP. And my understanding is that'll happen in a matter of days, if not hours. And, you know, the functional effect of what Wes is talking about, in my opinion, is zero. And it just confounds me that we're talking about this.
Thank you, David. Wes, do you want to comment, or Joe, do you want to comment? Who wants to talk?
Some valid opinions and thoughts, and because the amendment is a document, and getting it to DEP is a document, and how we proceed with the CUP is a document, and that is the responsibility and authority of the planning board. So I think it's up to the planning board to decide how to handle it, and I'll step back out of it.
Okay, thank you, Wes. And in chatting with Wes earlier today, you know, while he raised this problem, you know, he did something that I think is good, that my bosses used to tell me when I worked, you know, don't bring me problems unless you bring me solutions too. And, you know, so he was looking for solutions to this to keep a sense of forward momentum. And one thing is that the folks he was working with on the Long Road construction permit, he's continuing to work with, and is going to keep that forward momentum going by doing the permit electronically and through the mail, so it's not a full stop on that permit, which I thought was a good thing. Joe, did you want to?
Well, I think I heard Wes say that he will now, Wes and you say that he will now ignore his former point and go ahead without being persnickety about the whole thing.
But I said, because documentation is documentation working on the ordinance is in the responsibility of the planning board.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you know, persnickety is as persnickety does, I guess, to quote Tom Hanks. So thank you for everybody for working through this. I think the folks, Brooke and Chad, do you have any questions or comments? Go ahead, Brooke.
Brooke Barnes with Stantec Consulting. We've assisted Long Road Energy in the, excuse me, permitting of the project. And I would just like verification that the shoreline zoning amendment has indeed been sent to DEP or is going to be sent tomorrow to DEP. I know they are expecting it, and I didn't hear any resolution to that, so I just wanted to make sure that it was sent ASAP.
Yeah, and let me apologize on behalf of the town and the planning board for any delay in getting that done. It is my understanding that we need to take the entire shoreland zoning ordinance with the amended section that David has already redlined, and we need to get that attested to by our notary in the town, along with the minutes of the meeting where it was approved, and it was a special town meeting. So we certainly have that, and we will get that to the DEP tomorrow if it hasn't already been started on today. And I'll visit Debbie and Danielle in the town office and do whatever I can do personally to see that that gets to the DEP. And I know David has calls into them. His one contact was out this week, but he spoke with somebody who was in his place. So we are working on that. David, do you have anything to add to that about our progress on that topic?
Yeah, I think that covers it. I mean, if it wasn't done today, it'll be done tomorrow. So I know the one contact is out this week, but Colin something was to step in. I left him a message saying it was on its way and to let us know if there's anything besides what we thought was the process. So
thank you.
Either Matt or I will confirm to you, Brooke, that it's gone out tomorrow after we get confirmation it's gone out.
Thank you.
So somebody knew that this had happened, and they knew that David and I needed to be punished. So they made me chair of the planning board, and they made David secretary. So no good deed goes unpunished.
Exactly.
Chad?
You're off mic.
Thank you, Mr. Straka. Just for clarification for the planning board, is our CUP, in your opinion, still valid? Are there any additional steps that will be required after DEP approval of the shoreline zoning amendment?
I'll let David and Joe comment. I don't think that after the DEP approves that there's anything we need to do to the CUP. I just rewatched the two planning board meetings where we had the public hearing and then went through your CUP, and what I recall as the only change in the future, potential change, is that when you actually get your DEP approval and the other acronym approval that that you have to get, if there are any changes that are required to the plan, we agreed, and I think this is in our conditions, that you'll be coming back to the planning board and we will update and reapprove the CUP. So, David, anything to correct or add there?
No. I mean, but I think directly to Chad's point, at least from my perspective, and anybody else on the board can say. I don't think there's any need to do anything. You know, your CUP was passed, was signed, and there's no legal, as far as our concern is, there's nothing we have to do post submission to DEP. If you want us to go belt and suspenders to, reapprove it, the three members who signed the permit were Matt, myself, and Matt Sanborn, and we're a majority of the board. So if you want us to, after we confirm it's submitted, we can reaffirm the CUP if that's something you want us to do. I don't think there's any problem in doing that whatsoever. But that's up to you. If you want the belt and suspenders of us reapproving it on the next planning board meeting, I'm pretty sure Matt and I would do that.
Yep, I don't have a strong opinion. I would defer to Brooke on whether that's necessary or not.
Hey, we'll want to do that just to clear the record, just to have an absolutely bulletproof evidence that everything was done according to Royal. And we would be waiting until DEP actually acted on that amendment before we would look for that.
Yeah, so let the minutes show that we will do that after we get the approval. I think that will address Wes's issues as well. And I also want to thank Wes for, if it wasn't for his comment on this, we wouldn't have learned that something slipped through the cracks. So so we're a team, and we're going to move forward as such. So thank you all. And to the Glendale folks, thank you for letting us take a quick break from your CUP to address that issue, because I think it benefits the approval process for your CUP as well. We'll now move into the planning board's consideration of the Glenvale Solar CUP. And I will turn it back over to, Rick and Aidan, if there's anything more that you want to present in terms of stimulus response, getting comments from the, I'm a market researcher. That's what I do, stimulus response. So, if there's anything else that you want to present, please go ahead. Otherwise, I'll open it up to the planning board and the CEO, as well as the selectmen, to ask questions and voice concerns. And what we are moving towards is getting to the point where we can go through and ascertain the conditions that need to be attached to the CUP. But let's get started.
So Matt, I don't want to really do much more of a presentation. I just want to offer that myself, Bill O'Connor from Longview Partners, the wetland scientist, Aidan Foley, Stefan Bird, or Eric Barron from Glendale are available to answer any questions that come up during this portion of the meeting. So with that, I'll just let you go about your discussion. Just know that I have the plans that were submitted and all the exhibits that we've had discussed, and the presentation slides available to pull up at any time throughout your discussion.
Okay, yeah, and just to let the board know that at our 325 planning board meeting, we asked Glenvale to make sure they have a certified wetland scientist here at the public hearing to address the issue of building over wetland areas. And that's why Bill O'Connor is here to address those issues. So with that, whoever has questions or concerns, bring them up. Aiden, what's up?
I thought you had offered a chance for an introductory statement, Mr. Chair, and if that is the case, I would love to speak briefly.
Sure, absolutely.
First and foremost, we never leave home without a certified wetland scientist on hand, and usually we let them go home at 5, but today we asked them to stay late. You've all put a lot of work into this project so far. I would not be surprised if you have a late meeting tonight. I don't want to cause any delay. I do want to give a little bit of the context of the project. We tried very hard to find sites which are suitable for large-scale solar projects, which can generate very cheap renewable energy without causing a nuisance. And so we look for sites that are tucked away in privately owned land that can directly connect to an existing transmission system without building any new lines. And we're very pleased so far with what we think we have here. The project got a lot better with the contributions from the Francis Small Trust. We welcome any questions you have, any comments. The power from this project is going to be sold to Central Maine Power. It's going to be used by Mainers. We're selling them the power for less than 4 cents a kilowatt hour. And there's a lot of great components of this project, and we are pleased to answer your questions from this point forward.
Great. Thank you, Aiden. Who would like to start with questions or concerns, things that you'd like Glenvale to discuss, answer, delve into? Okay. David?
Sure. So we have a couple new members that haven't seen everything. So maybe it would be helpful for Glenvale to talk about the wetlands that are on the site, what impact what they're gonna do to those wetlands, and what the relationship is with the federal government, with the state or federal government as it relates to those wetlands. So, I've heard that they are okay with what you're doing, but I guess I'd like to understand the process you have to go through to get that permission.
Okay, well, what I'll do then, David, is I will start, and I'm sure Bill will have to answer some of the more technical, nuanced questions that may come out of that regarding the wetlands themselves, the types, and his delineation, all of that. Do is go to that everyone has access to, and go to this sheet CS100, which is it's the overall plan, but it's got the wetland impacts depicted. So on site, you have obviously Ingalls Pond and the 2 stream threads that come down and feed it. And we are respecting the Town of Baldwin's shoreline zoning maps for the stream protection buffers here and here. And then also respecting the Town of Baldwin's shoreline overlay plan.
Can you just toss it up on the screen? Yeah, just share your screen.
Sorry. Oh, jeez. I'm presenting to myself, David. I'm very sorry.
That's okay.
Well, not in the interest of time, it's not. So again, what I was doing was talking about, so this is sheet CS100 in the main application plan set that was dropped off at the beginning of the project. It really hasn't changed. This is still what's being presented. This is what's going through the regulatory process. So what you see here is just a plan with some color on it, where the blue is here is the water in Ingalls Pond, and the I guess teal or lighter green is the wetlands. There is a stream thread that runs along this edge of the wetland, and then there's a stream thread that runs kind of a southwest towards Ingalls Pond from over in this area, almost on the Hiram town line. And what I was saying was, what you do see here is that we are respecting the shoreline buffer, stream protection buffer that Baldwin has in place per the Baldwin. We're respecting the ordinance. Now, in the past, the question has arisen, well, you know, that's great, but you're also cutting trees in the wetlands and putting in some of these wetlands on site, and then you're going to go out there and put array over it, panels. How are you doing that? Well, the inbound wetlands on property are less than 2 acres in size, which is, I think, the threshold in Baldwin for the ones that we're cutting trees in anyway. There are the ones that you guys have jurisdiction over, and as far as impact. And in cases like somewhere over here, we're not actually doing any array in that cutting. So that's really kind of what's going on. So these are small enough to not have buffer attributed to them and protection in Baldwin, I believe. So David, go ahead.
Yeah. So the yellow, the teal is protected wetlands, and then the yellow is also wetlands.
The teal is wetland that is not being disturbed, and I'll zoom in right here as a for instance. Hang on. So right here, what you'll see is I have a tree line that's actually going to be along this other thin line. That's the 100-foot setback or buffer to the stream. So this wetland, this green wetland here is basically what we're not cutting any trees in, and it's all within the tree line. The yellow, you know, for like in this area, is the area that is being cut, and then the array can be built out over, but we're not proposing any grading work in that area. So we're not disturbing that wetland. And that's allowed. You're allowed to do a conversion at the state level. They don't really have a threshold problem as far as area, but as far as the Baldwin ordinance, I believe your jurisdiction starts if it's over a 2-acre area. And these are all these little pockets, finger wetlands, so to speak, or pocket wetlands that are not connected to anything are under that threshold. The bigger one over here along the stream is actually broken, and then there's just a stream thread through here, and then it breaks again here. So still, we're not impacting that. And then actually, this is all in Hiram right here. So, and in the case of this area right here, we're really just cutting, which is allowed on anybody's property, even if it has wetlands on it. So that's the long and the short of it. And if there's more technical questions or you need more of an explanation, again, Bill's with us to talk about that. But
so I guess I'm focused on that. I'm focused on the wetlands on the far right side, the larger yellow that connects into the teal.
Right here?
Yeah.
Okay. This right here is Hiram. That's the Baldwin. And then the portion that's in Baldwin is we're just cutting for shade right there, which is allowed. Anyway, you're allowed to remove trees. So that is all within the town of Hiram right there.
And so under state law, you're saying you can cut the trees in those wetland areas and put the panels on top of them?
Yeah, and then you do pay fee for the posts as part of the application process, but the posts are so small, they're only like 4 inches in diameter, that even with 100 of them, let's say, you're not generating a big area of actual impact. They're not seeing the canopy of the array as being an impact, because any rainwater that falls on those panels still falls on the ground. It's not like you're paving it, I guess, is what I would say. And again, we're not proposing to disturb the area out there. We're just proposing to cut the trees to make use of the land.
And there's no connection. It looks like you're putting a road in between the Baldwin wetlands in the middle of the property and the Hiram wetlands in the red area. Those two wetlands are not connected today?
Right here?
Right.
No, we'll zoom in. This is the wetland line right there. Hang on, let me get a polyline so it's a little easier. I'll trace it out in red. The colors and the array make it tough, I can understand. So basically I'll start back here, but this is a closed wetland. It stops there, and then it runs off this way along the ravine that it sits in. It sits in like a little depressed area that runs off that direction. So that stops there, and then this one is kind of running the other direction from the high spot. The road's kind of following a high line, but they're separated, and we threaded the road between them along a high spot. And then we ran down a bank here and then around the corner, but they aren't connected. This one runs off this way, and this is actually running this way further into Hiram and eventually winds its way back.
I actually like the fact that the wetlands will be shaded. I believe that it's beneficial to keep the temperature of the water down and not cook the animals in it, which might happen if they're exposed to the sun all the time. I'm happier with the panels in the wetlands.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe our wetland scientist can confirm that or talk more on that subject. The effect.
Feel free, Bill. I'll Vanna White the presentation for you. You tell me where you want me to go on the plan, and I'll do it.
I think you're right in the right area there, Rick. These wetlands are not, especially in this portion of the property, there's not much that is unique about these. These are forested wetlands that in some cases, especially in these narrower wetland channels, if it hadn't been for sort of outdated logging practices, they might not be wetlands at all. You know, a lot of these skinnier, more linear wetland bodies that I was identifying were the result of skidder ruts, you know, that never got fixed when the loggers were on their way out of the woods. And so, you know, this sort of it's not functioning as great habitat now because of the level of disturbance that is in the area of some of these things. And the transformation from one wetland type to another, even if it is really that, I mean, what we're dealing with here, especially in this portion of the property, are strictly forested wetlands, and almost exclusively forested wetlands with not any real vernal pool habitat, no real rare, threatened, or endangered species, not even any rare plants to speak of. And so if the trees are cut here, the conditions that make them a wetland should remain the same. You know, to qualify as a wetland, it has to meet 3 parameters. The first is hydrophytic vegetation, which are wetland plants. You know, the wet ferns, the wet grasses, the wet tree species. The second is wetland hydrology. If you're standing in it and your sneaker is wet, likely that condition is met. And the third are hydric soil conditions, and that's really my specialty. I came up working with soil scientists, and that's the hair that we love to split. And so what we were dealing with in these is these soils are barely hydric. You know, you have to have 7 inches or less to the seasonal high groundwater table below the mineral soil surface to qualify as hydric soils. And in most cases, these were barely 7 inches. And in a lot of cases, it was between 8 and 12 inches. And so as far as the wetlands are going to function essentially the same with the solar panels there as they are now. Their primary treatment is, or their primary function really is, just sort of groundwater storage after storm events. There's not a ton of value to it. We studied the vernal pools at this time last year in 2020, and I think I might have found 10 egg masses over 108 acres. So it's not even great habitat for the amphibians as well. But I'd be happy to answer more specific questions about all of the wetlands. We had 3 different wetland types here. The primary wetland type was forested wetlands. There's a large area of emergent wetland in the vicinity of Ingalls Pond. And then in the zone that's sort of in between the two, we have areas of scrub shrub wetlands. Nothing really unusual about any of it. The streams that we identify here, the stream that is more to the south of the project, down kind of where Rick is showing now, is a much larger stream channel with a lot more interesting natural and aesthetic features than the stream that is being crossed in the 2 small places that is more to the north. As a matter of fact, the stream that is being culverted or bridged, depending on where we land, is discontinuous in a lot of places, and it was hard to follow exactly where the stream channel was. So its likelihood of being able to carry fish species beyond something that's really tiny was fairly unlikely. As you get up into the area of wetland area number 3 on Rick's map, about where he's got his hand, in that area there, the stream channel was going in about 10 different directions, and it was really hard to identify what the central thread of it was, because that part of the land is pretty low and flat, and the stream doesn't have a velocity to make one certain defined channel in those locations. And so even that, if you're thinking about what a valuable stream resource might be for the town of Baldwin, it's pretty low on that list.
Bill, does the DEP manage all types of wetlands equally, or do they prioritize and manage them differentially? And I guess my specific question is, are they less concerned about forested wetlands than other types of wetlands?
Based on the setbacks that they assign to what they term wetlands of special significance, which is something with a significant wildlife habitat, an emergent wetland in excess of 20,000 square feet, like what you have down near Ingalls Pond, those would require a 75-foot no soil disturbance setback without a permit. Typical forested wetlands like this, if they don't have vernal pool habitat and they don't have a stream channel on the bottom, because the stream channel is going to beg a setback automatically, they don't really have any specific setbacks. So I'm reluctant to say that they don't value them because, you know, wetlands are important across the board, but they are things that you are allowed to freely fill. And if we were looking at a much smaller project that had a smaller level of wetland alteration and wasn't going to create the amount of impervious area, thus ending up in a site law project like what we've got here, you'd be able to fill these without a permit up to 1/10 of an acre each, or 1/10 of an acre, you know, for the project. And so I would have to say, based on my experience, if this weren't a huge project and somebody was just looking to cross it with a driveway, we would have minimal wetland permitting. You know, obviously, if there was ever a question, we would get DEP to come in and make a stream determination to make sure that we were meeting the setbacks to the water body. But beyond that, these are pretty straightforward, very, very, very typical wetlands of southwestern Maine.
Just for a scale for folks, this stream crossing right here from the road where we have the culvert that we are sizing to the Army Corps standard. The direct wetland impact in red right there is 1,930 square feet. And what Bill was saying, you can do essentially without a permit on one property is 4,300 square feet. So you would have to be a little over twice this size of an actual wetland fill before they'd even approach you for a permit, or you'd have to approach them, I should say. And that would be like if you're doing a driveway or a road crossing or something of that nature that was, you know, in a fatter section of a wetland. And that's why we selected that spot. We would have looked at this spot, but the hill, the climb right here was too much. So we couldn't use that spot. We had to back it up over here. If we hadn't have crossed here, we would have no real direct impacts because this is, again, just crossing the stream thread right there and not actually a wetland. It's finicky.
Those stream threads there, in case you're not familiar with this, are stream channels that exist entirely within upland. There's no, I couldn't make a wetland area even if it was only 6 inches wide adjacent to that stream because the 3 parameters necessary for it to be categorized as a wetland per the Army Corps weren't met.
Wes, did you want to add something? Were you going to make a comment?
Comment about the wetlands. When we had the site walk, I took particular attention at one we came across, and there isn't that much water, and it's particularly there even mentioned there vernal pools, and I believe it was referred to one time as a low impact vernal pool. When the solar farm over Maetta's would be put in, I visit twice a week for several weeks to see what goes into this, and the only negative impact is they drill little 4-inch holes to put screw thread pipes into it, and they're about 20 feet apart. So actually, with the fact that the stumps are going to be left there, the only violation to the wet is a drilled hole and a pipe put into it, and they're about 20 feet apart. So I'm not upset. I think it'll be okay, and of course, maybe some of the small growth bushes and whatnot will be eliminated, but be replaced by grass. So there's still a habitat for small animals there. So I feel comfortable. I think it's okay.
Okay, good. So Rick and Bill, I thought that I heard either during a discussion with folks from Long Road, or maybe it was during discussions on Glenvale, I thought I heard the comment that the DEP charges a fee that you actually have to pay the DEP for if you build over wetlands. Is that correct? Did I hear that correctly?
They have not been assessing fees on solar projects out over the wetlands right now. They're, again, let me zoom in on this area, for instance, on this plan. You see these little red dots? Those are the posts that are occurring in the wetlands. So they're having us tally up all that impact, and they're assessing the fee for those, but not the clearing. And remember, the state of Maine is a pretty big timber state, and there's a lot of land here that gets cleared all the time, you know, either selectively or, you know, if you go out into other parts of the state where there's either timber harvest for lumber or not really much pulp necessarily anymore. But when they're harvesting for that, they can sometimes clear cut, and they would go right through here and think nothing of it. The state would have nothing, they wouldn't have a problem with that. It's really the direct impact, which we've called out in red, that traditionally is getting the fee. To muddy the water a little, the Army Corps does have the ability to get involved and assess a fee, but they use the state fee mechanism. It's very convoluted, to say the least, and frustrating. But far and away, they're generally just assessing impact fee in lieu fees on impacts that total more than, I believe, it's 10 or 15, is it 10,500 or 15,000?
I thought it was 15.
It's 15,000 square feet. So we're not even remotely close on the direct impact. Even when you tally up all the little 4-inch posts. So.
Right. Yeah, I was just thinking that it would be nice if those impact fees came to the town instead of to the DEP, but I guess that's how they like to operate and build it into their budget.
Well, I will tell you this, the DEP would like it if they could use those impact fees. The impact fees in lieu actually go to a fund they use to buy land that they want to set aside for preservation. So I actually had that conversation with the fellow who's in charge of the Bangor Augusta region recently, and I kind of ribbed him a little bit about that. And I said, "Oh yeah, the in lieu fees, you guys really love that. You can start to hire again, huh?" He's like, "No, we can't even use it to hire. We have to put it aside to do land acquisition for preservation and conservation." So.
Okay, well, all for a good cause. Okay. What other, and thank you, Rick and Bill, for taking us through the issues of the wetlands and the vernal pools and things so thoroughly, obviously very well thought out. What other thoughts or concerns or issues does anybody on the planning board or the select board or our CEO have? Any topics? Please just raise your hand and jump in. Joe.
Yes, I was just looking through our land use ordinance because I was remembering what we called the Gordon-Milliken Amendment. Gordon was one of the sweetest guys you ever wanted to know. And he was an old guy on the planning board when I started. And he got upset because somebody put a road right next to his property line, the whole length of his property line. So there is a setback from the property line for a road, and I couldn't find it just now. And so my question is, how close to the property line are you to Hiram for your access? West Road.
Let me check the scale first, sorry. I actually let go of the screen share, so all my panning and zooming right now is not making me busy. All right, so I'm just gonna measure this. We are approximately 40 feet to the road from the property line. At the close.
Great, thank you. Thank you, that's great.
Don, you raised your hand.
Yes, I did. Thank you. Obviously, I'm just getting into the project and listening to this probably for the first time. But one question that I'm thinking about is, what are we doing for ground cover? After we cut the trees down, soil erosion, how are we taking care of soil erosion? There's going to be a lot of, it looks like a lot of cut and fill on these roads. I was primarily focusing on ground cover underneath the solar cells in these wet areas. Is it just going to be left the way it was naturally, or is it going to be, there's some material being brought in, or what?
Well, I can answer that without, again, screen sharing. So the area that's being cut, regardless of whether it's a wetland, forested wetland, or just a forest, has to be reseeded. So as you go, and this gets established through the process of the development, putting the panels in, actually probably prior to that, they'll hydroseed it with a conservation seed mix that has a mix of plant seed, tall grasses, wildflowers and things of that nature to establish a good, strong stand of vegetation in the area where the trees used to be.
My question, I think what I'm really focusing on, is there going to be any gravel paths between the solar arrays for access? I mean, is it just going to be all metal, or are you going to have some gravel put down?
The gravel is really only the access road and the loop road. There'll be some gravel pads for the inverters, but what we're going to use is what they refer to as the CMP cross section, the central main power cross section on the pad inverter, the inverter pad areas for gravel. And that's the way you assemble that gravel section. It allows for it to be essentially a self-treating stormwater.
Right.
It's a little more porous than the average gravel road.
But nothing between the arrays?
You mean gravel between the arrays?
Yeah.
No, that's going to be grass or vegetation from the conservation seed mix.
I'm thinking that when you cross over these wetlands, the soil is going to the ground's still going to be soft. I mean, are you going to rut through the topsoil in that area, or is it going to be stable enough to drive on? Or
it's my understanding. Well, I don't know if they're going to drive each individual row. That's what the loop road's for.
Yeah, but you might have some sort of a vehicle, a small vehicle to get between the arrays, I would think.
Yeah, well, Aiden can answer that. He's got his hand up, and then Wes is one to ask a question too. So I guess Aiden, I'll let you answer that question.
Yeah, I thank you, Rick, and thank you, Mr. Sharp. I think I hear two questions. One is about construction period,
right,
and then one is operating period.
That is correct.
The whole site will be seeded, very likely hydroseeded, depending on time of year, but I've never seen a site that wasn't hydroseeded. So the whole site will be hydroseeded as part of the construction with a type of seed mix designed for solar projects. So you'll have various types of grasses will be the stable vegetation. During construction, we anticipate our requirements or restrictions from DEP will not want us to ride vehicles on the bare soil in those areas. So we would anticipate we would use slash or other material, not a mat, but we would use vegetation found on site, and we would not, we would minimize travel. Most of the travel on a site is in four-wheelers. There's a machine that runs around putting in the posts. That's a tracked machine. After that, it's just four-wheelers are the typical vehicles that you see within the rows. And then mowing will be done twice a year, and that will be done by ride-on mowers. Unless the ground conditions is too uneven for a ride-on mower, and it will be done by foot using a hand trimmer. So there will be some. It's unavoidable to have some vehicle travel in those areas during construction, but it will vast majority of it will be four-wheelers, and they'll be it'll be minimized.
Are you going to be using like diversion berms just to control anywhere where you get severe erosion when you're coming down some steep slopes? I'm not just talking about the wetlands area now. I'm talking about, it looks like when you're constructing those roads, there's some pretty heavy cuts and fills in those areas.
Yeah. Well, I actually will share back since you're speaking the language. So what we've got, I'm still stuck on a dimension here. Hang on. So as you go around, we have either sheeting flow if the road, it's a narrow road, 16 feet wide, so it's just going one way, pitch in a lot of cases. And in that case, that'll just be a stabilized, grass embankment.
That looks like it's about 6 feet of fill there. Is each line a 1 foot contour?
I think so. Yeah. And then
that's 6 feet of fill there. So that's quite a bit of, you're moving a lot of dirt.
Yeah. And
how do you keep that from getting back down into the streams?
This is not the erosion control plan, but along the buffer, we are required to put a double row of either erosion control mix berm. I wouldn't foresee using a silt sock in this type of environment, but either an erosion control mix berm made from stump grindings, 2 of those parallel to one another around the resource, or 2 rows of silt fence is required by the DEP. And there's a stormwater pollution prevention plan, the state of Maine version, which they're delegated the authority to oversee the EPA stormwater program in Maine. They call that stormwater pollution prevention plan erosion and sedimentation control plan, and the folks on site are required to keep that up to date and fill out logs for the erosion control, make sure they're logging any repairs that have to be made to that perimeter, and keeping up with it and mitigating any erosion they run into. You'll also see that we do have ditches. If, in the case of this area is a bit of a hill coming down towards the road, we've put a ditch in line on the inside. And every so often there'll be either a culvert pull off, or in this case right here, we have a what they call a ditch turnout to a treatment buffer. This will go out over a level spreader, stone lip level spreader, and out through the buffer to the wetland and be left to treat that way. Over here,
on the other side of the road, you have a cut.
No, on this side of the road, we have a fill.
Fill, and that side, it looks like one side is a cut.
This side's a cut, a slight cut. It's really just a shaving. We position the road so it would mostly be along the edge, but we were trying, in this case, it's a bit of a cut because we were trying to hold it back from the wetland.
Yeah, I see it.
So over here, what you'll notice, Don, is that we have spaced pull-out culverts every so often on the ditch, because you know how it gets, especially if there's any kind of a hill, which this is. We didn't want a long run of a swale, so these bypass culverts that go out into the meadow underneath the panels are spaced such that I think they're only about 250 feet apart, to kind of minimize racing water down that ditch. And again, this last one here has, again, a ditch turnout to a level lip spreader, and then we'll have a protected meadow buffer or buffer underneath the array.
Yeah, and I know I'm not looking at the soil erosion plan, but I'm just talking in general. I mean, there's a lot of earth moving here. There's a lot of disturbance to the site. You're changing basically runoff characteristics from forest to meadow. Thinking about increase of runoff, you know.
Yep, no, we've run a full stormwater model, and again, what you'll notice here too is the state requires some form of stormwater treatment. You see these areas here with the little cross with the plus sign hatching. Those are all required to be maintained as what they refer to as a buffer, and you know there's a certain quantity of those that we need to provide along the impervious surface of the road in order to maintain the treatment characteristics that the state's looking for under their ordinance, or not their ordinance, their regulation.
Right. I was more concerned with impact to Ingalls Pond. You know.
Yeah. And you know,
how we're dealing with that.
The other thing to understand too is that the state does have a disturbance at one time threshold that you can't exceed. So as we go along and build, it's not like they're going to blow open all 100 and some odd acres at once. It comes in chunks, and you have to establish the prior piece before you move down the line. So they may do some of the foresting all at once, but when it comes to the road construction and moving in and doing the rest, they have to proceed in a manner that's kind of phased out and staged.
All right. So on your soil erosion plan, you must have a sequence of construction outlined on that.
There's a set of notes in the back that the DEP requires on all projects that discusses how much can be open at once. Generally, the erosion and sedimentation control plan, sorry, I was itch, allows for that sequence to be modified, but they do have a threshold of drawing a blank on this number of acres at one time.
Okay.
But it can be modified by the contractor if they feel like what we've come up with in our plan isn't the way they would proceed, but they do have to maintain the same. I'm trying to find it. Of course, it's one of those things that you can't find when you want it because the notes are so stinking thick.
Well, I'm pretty much familiar with this sheet, and you know it's pretty much standard. So
yeah,
I'm glad it's there. I'm just, you know,
yeah.
as I said, I don't see the whole set, so I'm asking.
No, so the contractor can, you know, within the confines of the restrictions of the open area thresholds, they can move that around in how they feel it would best be constructed. But, you know, I think typically they can't have it.
Yeah, I understand that.
It's confused, but, you know, I know in New Hampshire, they limit it to 5 acres, and then on a project like this, where it's this big, it would be limited to 10, and I'm drawing a blank on whether or not in Maine it's 10 acres or 5. So I apologize.
Right. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Don.
Okay.
That was great. Great ideas. And if you want to see any more detail on the soil erosion plan or the sequencing plan or anything like that to get more comfortable with the impact to Ingalls Pond, I know that Rick and Aidan will be able to get you the detail that you'd like to see.
Do we have a set in-house? We have a set in-house I can look at?
Yeah, I think, and I can certainly send the same file share to you, Don.
That would be great.
Mr. Chair?
Okay.
Yes.
Yes, Aidan,
Yeah,
go ahead.
Because this is our first time to meet Mr. Sharp, I just would like Rick to just spend a moment talking about how we're moving the road away from Ingalls Pond. And given that was Mr. Sharp's concern or a concern, I think we're doing something really quite helpful for the pond. So if Rick could just spend a minute thinking about that, I think would be helpful.
Absolutely. So right now, Dawn, this is Route 113 here, going past Ingalls Pond, or the eastern portion of Ingalls Pond. There's another big section over here after some island area in some spots. But the portion that we have on, obviously, is right here on the east side. Today, this double dotted line here is where the access road to this property is. It actually starts in Hiram. The landowner was a bit chagrined by that, but that's where it starts and it comes in. And as you can see, it runs pretty much right along Ingalls Pond, if not in it, depending where you're at. And it gets pretty punky in spots as you walk in. As you remember from the site walk, there was a few spots where it had actually managed to wash out. I think one of those might be like right here. And another one might have been right here. What we recognize is that this is not acceptable to have a construction or access road for a large tract of land that's being forested. I mean, let's say that this wasn't being done, this would still be no good, even if they were logging it all the time.
Right.
It's just way too close to the resource. So as part of the project, what we've done, again, because this isn't even, technically isn't even on the property, we're moving the entrance over here. But that is in the area that's already, you know, being impacted by Route 113, and then promptly moving it up to as close to the property line as we can, and continuing to climb the topography there. And what that will allow is for this road to not be traveled anymore and not be an issue, and revert back to woodland, essentially.
Yeah, I can see that. It looks, I like what you did there. You're creating a much better buffer between the roads and the pond by putting it up on the hill.
Yeah, no,
Yeah, you have several hundred feet of forest that you have to filter through.
It'll be a nice improvement.
That would be nice.
Will allow for some of this area here to, you know, be a less disturbed habitat, and this most definitely right here. So.
Yeah, that is an improvement, that's for sure.
Yeah, when we run the sidewalk, it's a little surprising, especially as you get down and start to head towards the log landing or what have you on the other side of the power lines, just how close you are. You're pretty much walking right along the edge of that wetland.
Right. Okay, good.
Right. So are there any other topics that board members would like to bring up? David, I thought you had your hand raised earlier.
I think Wes was the next one. I think he had his hand raised earlier.
Wes, take your, there you go. Yeah.
And a lot of it was spoken about. I just wanted to fortify and back up Rick in that and let Don know that the erosion is very little. When sun rays, but there's in over at Maya's pit, I visit a lot, and I was surprised that they did not bulldoze the land at all. The rays followed the contour of the rolling undulation of the land, so there was no need to flatten anything out. And they used a lot of wood chips for preventative erosion if it was going to happen, which it didn't. And I'm sure all the sites there will be like that. I've did the detail of erosion control on Long Road project, and they even mentioned that if land is disturbed in construction, it should be seeded within a week that it's disturbed. So they take a lot of care on it. So I feel comfortable about that. And the biggest disturbing of land is digging trenches for electrical conduit. But that's in isolated areas, and I'm sure it'll be controlled. So that's my 2 cents worth. Thank you.
Thanks, Wes. So, David?
Yeah, I saw on your website that part of this plan was to establish a community benefit plan. And I didn't see anything in the documents that you submitted to the town that described what that community benefit plan was. And I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about what, what that was and I guess if it should be part of the CUP or if it shouldn't be. I just didn't understand.
I can feel that, Rick. Thanks for the question, Mr. Struck. So what we mean by that is that we reserve in our construction budget and our operating budget, we reserve amounts to make contributions to local organizations or initiatives. We don't view it as part of the permit, although we wouldn't be antagonized if the town did, but we don't view it as part of the permit, and we don't include it as part of the permit filing. What we'd expect to do with that is find useful local causes to contribute to in both communities, because the project's in two communities, and the budget involved might be during construction, we might be talking $20,000 to $25,000, and during an operation period, $1,000 to $2,000 a year. I know Baldwin has been talking about a community garden. If that is a project that is funding limited, that might be the sort of thing we can help with. The Francis Small Heritage Trust is rattling the tin cup to try and buy some land from a forestry company. That land is not in Baldwin, but it's within the same watershed. So things like that, we would seek input locally before we selected the organization or the beneficiary. We would probably consult the select board in Baldwin and the municipal officers in Hiram if we needed help identifying a cause, or if we did, have someone we wanted to kick into. So that's what the community benefits plan is about. And ideally, the causes would ideally relate to the environment, natural resources, recreation, something that has nexus with our business, what we do for a living.
Any follow-up, David?
No, I appreciate the additional information. I just wasn't sure what that was about. So I appreciate Aidan kind of filling that out a little bit. And great.
Yeah. I mean, I think my view, David, would be if we came out with that as part of the permit application, I think that, frankly, I don't think that looks very professional. So that's why we haven't raised that. But it's part of our plan. We had to build a budget for local construction spending, local economic development when we won our PPA, when we were selected to sell energy to CMP, and that spending was part of our plan. It's something we're very serious about, and it's just for us a matter of finding the right local initiative.
Tracy, what have you had any particular thoughts or comments you want to make? What is your take on this so far, since it's your first project here that you're seeing for Baldwin?
Yeah, it's interesting. I like the fencing change. I think that's helpful. I was interested in hearing a little bit more about groundwater protection. I think I heard Rick say there's essentially no impact or no consideration specifically for groundwater, which was one of the thoughts I had. And then from the community, initially when it was talked about prior to the application, some concerns about the materials and the recycling of materials, which aren't part of this application, and then the noise and the impact to any abutters. I didn't hear any abutters at the public hearing making any statements about that. So I was trying to run through what potentially, in terms of conditions, may take into consideration if there are in fact anything we need to be looking towards for protection related to noise or anything else. And I heard Rick say there's not much impact in those areas. Is that correct?
Yeah. So I'll quickly share my screen and then stop because I realize that can be a nuisance to lose everybody's reactions. But so I'm going to zoom out a little bit real quick here, folks. So this is pretty much the whole site. Again, we have the substation here, and this is a 200 scale plan. I think. Yes, 200. So I got to change 200. So the substation, the nearest corner of the substation is going to be just over 270 feet to the property line. And that is, there's not really any other home or anybody over there. I think that's a large wood lot. And then the substation itself, that equipment doesn't actually make any noise. The pieces that do would be located on one of these inverter setups, and they make the equivalent of a refrigerator hum when they operate. And those are more inbound the property and project. Here, and here. And there's nobody around those. It's all wooded lots as far as you can see around here. So as far as noise goes, there's not really any real impact there. I mean, if you were standing right there and it was humming, you would hear it, but it wouldn't be much louder than when your refrigerator kicks on to do a cooling cycle. As far as the bigger question, the groundwater, again, we're leaving the surface of the ground, except for the road areas, open to continue to do what they do now today when it rains. So the runoff from the panels will be clean. There's no strange coatings or anything on the exterior of these panels. I know in the past there's been things that they would potentially treat them with, but these are all pretty standard solar panels, just like you'd have on a roof of a house for, again, treatment. So it's not any different than that. So there's not really a risk there of anything impacting the groundwater on this site. It's very akin to it falling through the forest that was there before the panel. It's going to hit the panel, roll off, go onto the meadow below, and then either soak in or in a really heavy rain start to run off a little bit and then soak in. As far as in the future, when they when this is decommissioned or a panel gets disturbed and needs to be replaced because it isn't functioning properly anymore, there are, depending on manufacturer of the panels, there are recycling programs in place for a few of the vendors. And then the rest of the cases, it would be like any other kind of, unfortunately, any other kind of debris that comes from a site or a renovation at a home. It would go to the landfill that is deemed the one for the area. And most of those landfills, if not all of them now, are all lined. So there's not, again, no risk of anything leaching out of the panels inadvertently and into the groundwater. These panels are all, I believe, inert, but there is one company that makes one that has some metals in it that can be a problem. But again, I think Long Road has supplied the studies that go with that particular line of panels, and it's shown that there's not a risk there either, because they're completely encapsulated in glass. So you really have to work hard to have anything other than trace leave those panels as far as any of the material on the inside. most solar panels nowadays are made from a variant of silicone, sort of like the base material of a microprocessor. It's essentially a really micro thin layer of man-made volcanic glass that's been shaved down, and that's what generates the electricity. And that's in between the panels of glass. With, obviously there's copper wire or whatever in there too, but it's relatively innocuous stuff. Again, aside from the one particular vendor that has the one that I think that has a heavy metal that's in some of their panels, but the other umpteen vendors are all operating under a different program.
Thank
So,
you.
Great. Joe, do you, you've got so much experience having, been so involved in the Long Road project. Do you have any thoughts or issues you'd like to have the Glenvale folks discuss?
Sorry about that. Yes, I just had a question about the western part of the project. Is there any statement in the submission about how the woodlands will be managed?
There. The western portion, so over here. Joe?
Sorry. Yes. Western, yes.
Yeah, so that's the part that is over towards the CMP line and then around the Ingalls Pond. Anything that's not being managed correctly for the array, Joe, and everybody else is going to be left to be forest and not messed with by Glenvale. Previously, we had discussed the lease exhibit, and this is essentially the area in red that Glenvale is going to have lease rights to. Anything outside of that is still controlled by the Estes family, and they can continue to use it how they have been. Obviously within the confines of both the DEP and town of Baldwin regulation. But right now I presume it would continue to be managed as a forest, and then every once in a while they may do a selective cut on the portion that they still control outside the lease.
I guess the reason I brought this up was my concern. We opened the meeting by looking at what the view would be from 113, and we talked about all the forest land between 113 and the project. And I think we all made this assumption that, this will be forest land as long as there's a project back there. And now I guess I'm finding out that's not a great assumption to come up with.
I don't know that that's the plan. I know that, again, they haven't been clear cutting the Estes. I mean, have the Estes clear cut in any recent history, Wes, by your recollection? And they do some selective cutting now and again, but it's not enough to clear it out.
Well, you can't cut below 40 square feet basal area per acre anyway, by state law right now for a piece that size, a piece of land that size. They'd have to file for conversion. But I bring it up because we made an assumption when we looked at the visuals, and now I'm not sure that assumption is correct.
I can't speak to what the land outside the lease would be done with, but I know that if they were going to cut it, they'd have to get a permit at the very least through the Division of Agriculture, Conservation, and Forestry. If not through Baldwin. I don't know if Baldwin has a permitting process for forestry work of any large scale.
No, permit by rule to start cutting, and you can start cutting before you send in your permit by rule. Do it right over the internet. I cut all the time. That's what I do. And that's why this came up and why I thought of it. The assumption was not correct for the view shed pictures. I'm not.
So are you saying that the view could change, Joe?
Yeah, yeah. We're getting shown a view shed picture, which posits trees there, says we got trees there. Well, Glenville doesn't control the trees.
That's right.
And Steve Estes could have them cut off tomorrow. I'm not saying that's good or bad. I frankly don't have a problem with looking at solar panels, but I understand people do. And what would that view shed look like without the trees there?
Well, yeah, I mean, we're happy. We were happy with the assumption that the trees are there. There's isn't an example. We don't control that area, but there isn't an example of a clear cutting of that in what wasn't in our conceptualization of the project. And I think, as Rick said, there's some limitations on what could easily be done. So we don't necessarily think that is a likely outcome. It just wasn't part of what we were asked to look at. You know, it's not part of the land we have control of, Mr. Pierce, and we have not been asked to look at that by the Maine DEP either. So it's just, I suppose it would not appear to be within the our prerogative for the project we're planning, because it's not land we control.
That being said,
Yes, David.
they do control to the stream, and so there'll at least be that much wooded buffer there of 100 feet on either side of that stream, because that is a stream buffer. And remember that Ingalls Pond also has the RP zone that protects it as well, of 250 feet. And that extends out beyond the CMP corridor.
Looking at the contour,
David?
it may very well be that the land itself would hide your project from.
Yeah, I was just looking to actually change the subject. I was going to say that it's 9 o'clock. I mean, I think from my perspective, what I think is appropriate for this project is to take the long road conditions that we approved for Long Road and essentially copy them and apply them to this project, and to see if there's any modifications to those conditions that would need to be tweaked for this particular project. But essentially, following those conditions for this project, I think they're pretty much all applicable. I think we have to tweak a little bit because there's some things that Long Road had, like Tracy mentioned, the panels that Long Road chose were auto recycle, and there's no indication that this project is going to be those same panels. I think Long Road also had a pretty sophisticated process by which they monitored the panels on a real-time basis. I didn't see that in this project. So I think there's some things we have to switch, but I would propose that the task ahead would be to take those conditions and just modify them for this project. And that would be the most efficient way forward.
Yeah, thank you. I was gonna suggest something like that. I already wrote down that we should plan to continue our review on April 13th. And I was gonna suggest that we take a Word version of the 13 or the 12 Long Road CUP conditions, as well as our standard conditions, and just adapt them to, change the name of the LLC and the holdings. And we should distribute those, if that's appropriate, so that everybody can evaluate them. And then we'll get back together on April 13th at our next scheduled meeting.
Okay.
And do some heavy lifting on the conditions, which is the last step before actually taking a vote. And I'm glad that you brought up the monitoring, David, because that was one thing that there was a lot of discussion about, the visits per year. What's done about weather issues, broken panels, things like that. And there was a lot of talk about Long Road's operations center in Portland and their 24/7, 365 monitoring of the panels and the operation, and we want to cover those same sort of oversight issues for this. With that,
I think Aiden wants to say
ask
something.
for adjournment. I wanted to see if Rick or Aiden wanted to say anything.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. I would say on operations and maintenance, we did include operations and maintenance information in our state permit application, which is left at the municipal offices, and we included that as an exhibit to this application. And operation and maintenance, I can't speak specifically to what Long Road do, but there's a customary set of procedures which involves having real-time monitoring of a project, daily check-ins of anomalies of energy generation versus expected energy generation using weather stations, preventative visits, generally quarterly for electrical and mechanical, and as needed for any ad hoc requirements, and typically twice a year for site maintenance. And then plowing as needed for safe access to the site. So there's a whole set of operations and maintenance plans that I think is customary. On the modules, as Rick said, we're not planning to use First Solar modules. They're the only commonly used modules that have the environmental restrictions. We would rather not preclude us from using First Solar modules, because module selection can be changed late in the day prior to construction. So we'd rather retain the First Solar conditions in case it comes up in late stage construction planning. But I would say it's about a 5% chance or less that we would use First Solar modules if that choice were available to us. It's not something we would really be too sticky about. And First Solar is code for the modules that have that higher environmental sensitivity.
Thank you, Aiden. Rick, can you give me back control so I can close the meeting?
I certainly can.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So Matt, what may be helpful in between now and the next meeting to make it as efficient as possible is to have the applicant and either you or me go through and compile a list of all the documents that they presented. I know, Matt, you were working on that already.
Yeah.
That's an important list, and maybe just making sure the applicant, you agree that it's all inclusive, especially these new documents. The PowerPoint, I don't think I have seen a copy of the PowerPoint. And then there was the new document with the fencing. I'm not sure I'd seen that document.
Yeah.
And then I can distribute the list of conditions that we used for Long Road to the board members, just as I think I can do it as a Word document. And Rick and Aiden, if they don't have those, I can give them to them as well.
I think we may, but I would really appreciate getting it again, just in case.
Yeah, I actually, rewatching the Long Road process, the two meetings. I know we spent a long time in the first two conditions identifying all of the contents of the CUP. So I'll certainly work with Rick and Aiden to get that nailed down. And David, if you take care of getting the conditions out to everybody, we should have a very efficient meeting with some good discussion. When we do open the next meeting, though, we lost Matt Sanborn, and I want to see if he has any comments, which will be the next meeting. And I also certainly want to ask Bob Flint if he has any comments or questions too, but we'll do that on the 13th.
Yeah,
Yes, David.
Matt Sanborn actually texted me and apologized for he was having connection problems, and he said if we vote on the CUP tonight, he's all in favor of it. And if we vote on going back in person, he's even more in favor of that.
Yeah.
Me too.
Well, yeah. Do you want to do as a last order of business? So I'll effectively close the topic of our discussion of the Glenvale Solar CUP. We have a plan in place to take that up again on the 13th. And as the last order of business, before we do a motion to adjourn, do we want to take a planning board vote on when to begin in-person meetings? Do we want to take that vote? Okay. So Tracy, David, Joe, and Don, and myself, everybody in favor of jettisoning Zoom and going back to in-person meetings, raise your hand.
What date?
Okay. That would be on the 13th.
Of May.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yeah, the 13th of May. I said 4/13, but you're right, Joe. It's 5/13, May 13th.
Would we still Zoom?
No.
I can't make the first. I can't make the 13th meeting in May.
Okay.
But I could, after that would be fine.
All right. Well, we will certainly get all of your comments so we can represent your thoughts there on the 13th. But it looked like there was 4 of us that voted for in person. So is that the other officers, David, Joe? Is that the plan then?
That seems to be the plan. It's been a problem for everybody with these Zoom or in person that some people can't Zoom and some people can't in person, and it's always unfair to somebody. And my apologies
Okay.
that he seems to be the one that this
Yeah.
is unfair to. We've been unfair to Matt for 6 months now.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
just as long as we follow we continue to follow the COVID protocols where everybody's masked. We do it in the big room. We try to stay 6 feet apart. I think since Maine's opened up for vaccinations for everybody, by May 13th, if people want to get vaccinated, they have had the opportunity to get vaccinated. So I think it's time to go back, and I enjoy seeing everybody in person. So I look forward to that.
Okay, all right. Okay, everybody, thank you so much, Tracy and Don. Thank you for your contributions. We're so glad that you are on the board now, and Rick and Aiden and the Glendale team, thank you for excellent preparation and presentation. And with that, we will, somebody make a motion to adjourn.
I move we adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Unanimous?
Yes.
Thank you, everybody. Have
Thanks,
a wonderful
Matt.
2 weeks, and we will see you on the 13th.
Okay. Good night.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, Rick.
Okay.
Welcome. Have a
Good
good
night.
Thank you.
Good
You
night.
too.